Guys, in section 7, we've covered quite a lot. We started off, we talked about Herbert Hoover, how Herbert Hoover didn't cause the Great Depression, but yet how Herbert Hoover reacted to the Depression, prolonged it, made it worse. You know, when I always tell you guys, if you don't know history, you could repeat history. And I believe it's very interesting about Herbert Hoover because Herbert Hoover felt the way to get America out of the economic problems we were in was to tax the wealthy. The wealthy was already being taxed 25%. He moved it to 63%. Therefore, 63 cents out of every dollar that the upper echelon made, they paid in tax. Guys, the upper echelon, the wealthy, those are the ones that ran the businesses. The wealthy people ran the factories. That is why when Herbert Hoover overtaxes them, he takes them out of the picture. Therefore, unemployment will get worse because once they go under, then they have to let all their employees go. So, like I said, Hoover did not cause the depression, but his actions made it worse. We also talked about bank failures, guys. Remember, that was going to be something I told you on the attendance question. You'll see. 744 banks within 10 months went under. $140 billion of income. Now that's working income would be lost in the Great Depression. Remember we talked about the fact that banks were not federally insured. So if I came in and I took all my money out and the guy behind me did the same thing, the bank had to shut down. Once they did that, anybody who owed money in the banks, they lose it. A great movie I always recommend to watch is It's a Wonderful Life. That was called a bank run. Today, banks are federally insured, so that can't happen. But guys, you have to remember, during the Great Depression, our country almost slipped off into the abyss. We were that close. Unemployment was high. There were no safety nets. There was no such thing as food stamps, unemployment, none of that. If you lost your job, you had nowhere to go to. There were massive food lines. We talked about the fact, guys, that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, will be elected. He will come in, he will serve 12 years. That's an attendance question. And he is the father of the Social Security system. That's another attendance question. Now, FDR, guys, historians basically have always said there are 3 presidents who had the greatest challenge. Now, I'm always very specific. I'm not saying these are the 3 greatest presidents. These are the guys that had the greatest challenge. George Washington, he's the first president. He has to learn how to be president. Abraham Lincoln's the president during the American Civil War. He has to keep this country divided at the greatest Civil War our country has ever known. You have the North and the South. Then you have FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He is the president during the Great Depression, so he's having to deal with the worst economic downfall ever known. On top of that, he is going to have to deal with World War II. Guys, World War II will plummet us into the greatest war our country's ever known. Basically, it's a war for our mere survival. We will fight not both the Germans, we'll fight the Germans and the Japanese. The important thing, guys, that we'll see in Section 8 when we talk about this is the fact that the Japanese army had gone over into China. They had defeated everyone they had fought. They were a brutal juggernaut of a war machine. The Germans had marched through Europe. Nobody had stopped Hitler's Nazi German war machine. We will fight not one of these, but both of these. And we will take both of these nations up in a world war while still in a Great Depression. FDR will be the guy that will lead us into that. If he is your president, and I get a lot of FDR papers, I want you to talk about his foreign and domestic policy. So let's talk about that, guys. His domestic policy. the New Deal, all the work programs that he puts in, all the employment that he does. That is his domestic policy. What's his foreign policy? It's pretty simple. It's World War II. It's working with Winston Churchill to try to keep the Germans and the Japanese from defeating all of us. That is his foreign policy. And the thing about it is, guys, FDR is your wheelchair president. The man has polio. The man cannot walk. Now, he wasn't always struggling with polio. He's a very healthy guy that will come down with polio, I think in his 30s, and he'll be confined to a wheelchair. But the interesting thing I always tell my students is no one knew that FDR was crippled. The media never released any photos of him in his wheelchair. In fact, I think you can Google this, there may be 1 or 2 photos out there with him in a wheelchair. And he was in office, guys, for 12 years. 12 years, 4 terms. The longest president ever had that. So yes, he is a very interesting president. I get a lot of FDR papers. But one of the things I always like to mention about FDR and any other president that you may look at was FDR, although I think he was a good wartime leader, I think FDR helped us in the Depression. Now, whether or not his policies took us out of the Depression, that's debatable. A lot of people believe that our country would have naturally came out of the Great Depression at the beginning of World War I because everybody went to work. Factories overnight in the United States went to work. Okay, so unemployment vanished literally within months of the Second War. Okay, but one of the interesting things I like to mention is, was FDR a moralist? Was he morally sound? And my deal, I would tell you, is I don't think so. You know, FDR, guys, he will die in Warm Spring, Georgia. He will die in his girlfriend's house, Lucy Mercer, and he'll die of a brain hemorrhage. So here's the guy that's president of the United States that dies in his house, in his girlfriend's house, of a brain hemorrhage. His wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, will actually find all this out, and when she finds out where he's at, she comes to see the house, and she realizes that her husband, the 32nd president of the United States, has died while he's with his girlfriend. And what even makes it a little bit more difficult for her is that her daughter had set up all these meetings. So FDR is not a moralist, not a very moral guy. Had an affair with a woman the majority of his married life that he ends up dying in her house. Was he a good wartime leader? I think he was, and history has judged him pretty well. Did he bring us out of the Great Depression? That's questionable. Historians today really don't think so. Was he the father of the Social Security system? He was. Is he the benefactor of the welfare system in which we have today? Quite possible. So that concludes this, guys. This is session 7, and we'll meet back for session 8.